Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the third episode of the Soccer Scene in conjunction with Sport in Limerick with myself, Adrian Finnan, and our analysts, Jason and Noel O'Connor. Delighted to be joined by the two lads once again on what is going to be a packed show this evening. We start off by discussing obviously the big game, hugely anticipated between Wexford FC and Treaty United, first game of the Airtricity League season. We'll also have the lads running the rule over the three other games in the division this weekend. Obviously, with the division layout the way it is this year, there'll always be one team with a free weekend. That's Galway United this week. So we'll be discussing four of those games, and obviously onto the fun side of things as well by the end of it for our viewers last year with how wrong I got it anyway in particular, was the table prediction. And to add another bit this year that I just missed out on, we also will have a table for the predictions of every game as well this season with 2 points for the correct prediction. We're not putting in score predictions. It's going to be either a draw or whichever team. You'll get 2 points if you get it right, and we'll see who comes out on top at the end of a 32 game slog at the end of the season. With all that said, Noel, without further ado, we'll talk about Treaty United's trip to Ferrycarrig Park on Friday night. They face Wexford FC. I know myself and Jason, we're all talking about it in the last couple of weeks. A bit of a revival, a change in the squad with Wexford, with Ian Ryan bringing in a whole new front line in particular. It'll be a tough game, obviously, as every game in this league is going to be. How do you see this one going for Treaty?
Yeah, tough game, and as you talk about predictions later on, and I do think that the two teams that seem to have made the most progress in the off-season, like outside, say, the full-time professional outfits, are Wexford and Treaty. I think both clubs have signed very well. Combination of very experienced players coming in, the likes of Jenny Corcoran going to Wexford, the likes of Joe Gorman and the Curran going to Treaty. And it's often not about money, even though, it's often spoken about money, but it's circumstances, it's, the geographical area where you are, players wanting to extend their career in the league rather than dropping down to junior or Leinster Senior League, whatever the case may be. And I think those two teams are going to be the most improved teams in the league this year. As regards Friday, I think it's a difficult opening for Treaty. I'd say secretly, Tommy might have preferred a home game for a start, because on paper it looks, an easy fixture. But I think, well, we certainly know from experience, and I think particularly this year, if this Wexford team has gelled together, there certainly will be formidable enough opponents on Friday night. And I suppose the flip side of that is I think there's a very good Treaty team there as well, and certainly very, very experienced. So the fact that it's the first game of the season, we don't really have a huge amount of farm line to go for. I would think that game will end up a draw. I think it'll certainly be a very tough and entertaining game.
Although you were complimentary about Treaty on occasion last year, I'm not sure. I'm a bit uneasy about this confidence building from you, Noel, for the start of the season with Treaty, but I do agree. Obviously, they've made some very good signings as well. Speaking of which, Jason, obviously we'll get your prediction for this as well during this period. We saw the team that started against Killarney, a lot of familiar faces there as well as the likes of Joe Gorman and in the Curran. Do you think that side that we saw last week could be similar? Because we do know that Sean Gearns and Dean George have picked up injuries and they are in a race against time to be fit for Friday. So do you think that firstly that those two players would come straight in if they were fit for Friday?
Yeah, I think if they're fit, they'll play, Adrian, definitely. We've got to look at it both ways, I suppose. Charlie Fleming played against Killarney. Jack Lynch played against Killarney. Both of them were coming back from injuries. Are they fit enough to start a league game? Are they fit enough to play 90 minutes? Maybe that was in Tommy's mind, I suppose, trying to get some minutes into them with this week in mind. But look, he has options, as Noel said. He's signed very, very well. And look, they were very, very lucky at times last year, Adrian, with injuries. As I said a couple of times, Sean Gearns went out with an injury and Mark Walsh was available. Mark Walsh went out and Sean Gearns was available. And they're kind of key pieces for every club, I suppose, throughout the season, because while both Wexford and Treaty have signed well, a couple of injuries to key players at key times can really upset your season, and it can nosedive it if things go against you. So I suppose they're the things that are out of Tommy's control, and out of Ian Ryan's control as well. But I'd agree with Noel, it's going to be a very, very difficult game for Treaty. They can't take anything for granted, I suppose, really. And look, while he'll play down things and he'll say, look, we're an amateur team and things like that. Let's be honest here and now, right from the beginning, Treaty will be looking to get into the playoffs this year. Is that Wexford's goal? I suppose secretly it might be with the players they've signed, but they won't be, I suppose, coming out publicly and saying it. Wexford have had a solid pre-season, Adrian. They have, they've played good opposition. They've played UCD recently, they've played Pats, they've played Rovers, and they've played Shelburne. And their two strikers, Conor Davis and Aaron Dobbs, have got off the mark in pre-season. I think Treaty will be going there looking for a win. And look, if they're serious about getting into playoffs and things like that, we know it's the first game of the season, but you want to hit the ground running, I suppose. No one is saying a draw. I'm going to go for a Treaty win.
Yeah, I know that you mentioned Aaron Dobbs and Conor Davis there, Jason, and they are two players who, when they came into the league originally, there was a lot of talk about them. It seems to have tailed off a tiny bit for both players, I suppose, on a consistent level. They also have Dinny Corcoran now among their books. I know he's aged maybe a bit, but he'll still, if he's on form, can be a formidable striker at that level. I suppose, Noel, if you're looking at that, players like that, and then you have Luka Lovic and Conor Barry, so there's threats all over the field for Wexford.
No, there is, yeah, and we spoke about Paul Hunt signing. The last Jimmy Corcoran to Cork, but then possibly signed a better keeper, albeit a bit like Treaty's keeper, probably lacking in game time the last season or two, but certainly a very experienced guy. Larkin Fitzgerald's still there at the back, a massive threat from set plays as well, and, a huge experienced guy to have. So I know Conor Davis from his UCD game, a very, very unselfish player, and maybe he's kudos, if you like, isn't in the amount of goals he scored, it's the amount of work he does and the link play, and how much of a team player he is. So, look, they have threats all over the pitch, and they certainly finished the season very well. But they lost a few promising players like Jack Moylan, who went to Shelburne, who was a real revelation down there. But what they may have lost in youth and skill, they certainly have brought in terms of hard-nosed experience, which is never a bad thing to have in this first division.
Yeah, it is incredibly hard, Jason, to analyse any game or predict any game in this league. But obviously, anything can happen on the first games of the season. We don't know what we're facing. We don't know what Treaty will be like, even to a certain degree. But I suppose on what you saw against Waterford and what you've heard from feedback, what do you think would be Treaty's main strengths, I suppose, in where they can get at Wexford?
Well, I suppose, look, building on last year and the additions they've made, it'll be a solid defensive setup, Adrian, will be, I suppose, the way forward for Treaty. We've mentioned Joe Gorman. If Sean Gearns is fit, they'll be the first choice centre-backs. You'd expect Mark Walsh to play, whether that will be right back, because we know Mark is very, very versatile. He can play that position as well. And then you're obviously looking at Callum McNamara maybe in the middle of the field, Lee Devitt, and it'd have to be a position for Jack Lynch in this team, in my opinion, because at this level he's a really, really good player. So I suppose defensively sound has to be the beginning, I suppose, for Treaty, looking for clean sheets. At the attacking end of the pitch looks a bit more important this year, Adrian. We haven't seen a whole pile of Enda Curran, but what we have seen of him, he's mobile. He's big, he's a target man, and he looks fit. Conor Melody is someone that has impressed me during pre-season. He looks fit, he looks like a new player. And Dean George, you'd be hoping, isn't an injury-prone player, Adrian. I'm afraid to say it. He missed a lot of games last year. He got a knock against Killarney, so you're hoping he's available. And if he is, he's going to be a very, very good asset, I think, this season. So to answer your question, solid at the back, looking at clean sheets, solid in the middle of the park, and looking then Jack Lynch, Conor Melody and the Curran at the top end of the pitch to provide goals and set pieces again will be key, I think. And that's the approach I think Treaty should take this season. We're talking about Wexford. We didn't mention Aidan Friel. He's another very, very good addition for them from Athlone. And Jack Doherty, obviously still there as well. He impressed me last year when I saw him. So again, Adrian, it's not going to be easy down in Ferrycarrick Park, but I just think if Treaty's pre-season has been as good as Tommy alluded to, and what we saw against Waterford, they could start with a win.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you as well on the point with Tommy Barrett. He did say that he was not even thinking about league assaults or playoffs, but we knew that was going to come anyway, regardless. But I suppose I'm going to agree with Noel. I think it may be a draw on the first game of the season. I don't think Tommy would be too disappointed with a draw, but I do agree, Jason, that, you know, if you do have serious aspirations, I suppose, of playoffs, these are the type of games you need to be winning to gain that momentum that Treaty gained at the start of last season. So I suppose just to move on now to the next game that we're going to cover as well, Athlone Town versus Waterford FC. Two very different pre-seasons. Noel, it may be fair to say, in that we don't know an awful lot about Athlone. They've signed players in the last few days publicly, but we still don't even know their full squad, to be honest, because they've only let out 4 or 5 players. One of those actually being Stephen Kenny, who won the first division with Limerick FC and played a year in the Premier with Limerick FC a few years ago under Martin Russell. So that's where that connection comes from. In one way, though, without sounding too harsh maybe on Stephen Kenny, I suppose the one fear I'd have for Athlone is, you know, if that is the most high-profile signing that we have seen so far from Athlone, that it will be a struggle. And, you know, with Waterford being a full-time outfit and having Ian Morris at the helm, who knows how to win the first division, and having, you know, the likes of Phoenix Patterson there, who's well thought of, I would say my own prediction would be that it will be a Waterford win. What do you think yourself?
Yeah, it's hard to look beyond the Waterford win. Is certainly brought up before, like, the sea change in Athlone in 12 months. And you're right about the signings. Like, they've been very, very slow. We've been watching, listening, seeing was there going to be an influx of players. You know, about 10 days ago, they had 5 or 6 only on the register, if you like. It hasn't improved dramatically since. And it looks like a real season of struggle for them. It may point to the reason why Paul Doolan probably left the scene, if you like, at the end of the season and decided travel commitments, and now he's gone to the Irish League. So it looks like it's going to be a tough year for Martin Russell, and the pity for him is, like, you know, probably to, if you like, a damage limitation setup might do better for them than the ideas that Martin will have or the way he wants to play. And I certainly think you can look beyond a Waterford win on Friday, albeit it's the first game of the season and anything can happen. But Waterford seem to have all their ducks in the row. Again, what Jason was saying about Wexford, certainly had a strong pre-season as well. Playing the likes of Dundalk and Bohemians, and it seemed that, you know, the weakest team that they put out in the pre-season was the one against Treaty here in the North Campus in UL there a couple of weeks ago. So it probably showed where their focus is. I know they had a good 2-2 draw with Bows as well, and it looks like a team that has way too much experience and a lot of goals in as well. That should be plenty good enough to take on Athlone and pick up the 3 points.
Yeah, that's a good point, Noel. I was going to bring that up with yourself, Jason. We did highlight when we saw the Waterford team against Treaty that we did feel it wasn't going to be near what the team that played in the first game of the league season, albeit there was a few players that will be there. You know, Waterford, you'd imagine, should not be, considering the experience in the squad, should not be caught for complacency at any time in the season as well. Obviously, as we mentioned as well, Ian Morris has won the league twice in 3 years too, but he has players like Eddie Nolan and Anthony Wordsworth there who were there last season as well. The club has remained full-time. It looks like all systems go really for an assault. I suppose in some ways similar to maybe Limerick FC, it won't be all their own way like that back in the day. But, you know, the owner came out and said they're going to remain full-time. It's been very focused pre-season, as Noel also said. So it's very hard to look past Waterford for this.
Yeah, we can't look past them, Adrian. You know, you mentioned Ian Morris there, serial league winner at this level. David Breen, someone who I'm very familiar with, involved in the coaching staff down there as well. And they're very confident, Adrian, going into the season. We know what happened at the back end of last season and the change of manager and things like that. So I suppose the owner had to do something very, very positive for the club and for the fans. And And he did, in fairness to him, by staying full-time and retaining some of the squad and adding to it. On paper, they look very, very strong. You mentioned Phoenix Patterson, and I suppose when we get to our predictions, that's going to be the key element for all the clubs, I suppose, in this league is, can they score goals, Adrian, because that's the difficult part of the game. A lot of coaches and a lot of managers can set teams up to be defensively sound. And we saw that with Treaty last year, but it's at the other end of the pitch. We saw Cork last year, they suffered with that element of the game by not scoring goals. And that's the way I'll be looking at teams over the next few weeks is, have they got that goal getter, I suppose, to drive them on and win the close games, because that's going to be very, very important. But yeah, I feel for Martin Russell, he's gone in there, he's taken the job on with that loan. Very slow, obviously, a squad coming together, so you'd question what budget Martin has available to him. But he's a fantastic coach, there's no doubt about that. But yeah, look, we can't look past Waterford and expect them to win.
Yeah, and just to alternate it somewhat, Jason, we're going to stick with yourself as well for the next game. We have Bray versus Cork, or Bray and Teely, as some people are still calling them at the moment, as they opened their campaign against Cork. We discussed Bray's squad actually in length because of the merger with Cabinteely and the fact that they took a lot of the players from Cabinteely last year too. It's been a real sea change at Bray. Treaty obviously went there last year and got an early result, but this is a totally different setup now. Pat Devlin at the helm as well. We have Cork City as one of the early favourites in the division. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, I think Cork will get the results. I think it's important that they hit the ground running. And if you look at their pre-season form, Adrian, it is impressive. Obviously, they were beaten by Pats 1-0, but they drew with Finn Harps. They beat UCD and they beat Killarney, and you even delve a little bit more into that. Dylan McGlade, 2 against Killarney, a goal against UCD. Barry Coffey on the score sheet. Cian Murphy, 2 goals to his name in pre-season as well. 1 against Shells and 1 against Harps. So they're my early favourites, I suppose, Cork, and it's going to be very important for them, Adrian, to hit the ground running. You rightly said, we don't know what's going to happen at Bray with the merger. It takes time, obviously, to integrate different players into the squad. That's a given. No better man, I suppose, really, than Pat Devlin to do that. And there's still, obviously, the players like Kevin Knight, they've Owen Massey, Zach O'Neill. They've added Curtis Byrne, I suppose, to Kieran Marty Waters, who both experienced campaigners, and Kieran Marty Waters, their record scorer. There's still goals in him, I'm sure. Curtis Byrne last year with that loan didn't rip it up, but he's capable. There's still a Paul Fox, obviously. Conor Clifford. So, look, they'll be strong, Adrian, and I would expect them to be in and around, I suppose, the shake-up at the end of the season, Bray. But I think Cork saw what they needed to add last year. The goalkeeper situation has been addressed. That was an important part for them.
That's actually a funny one, Jason. That was one I was going to bring up with you, but that's Corey Chambers signed during the week, and that's the 4th goalkeeper. I suppose, is that a sign as well, though, that maybe Mark McNulty might actually be taking a step back this year?
Well, look, with no disrespect to Mark, he's been a fantastic servant to Cork, hasn't he? But it needed to be addressed. Corey Chambers has come in, they've Jimmy Corcoran, they've David Harrington, and obviously Mark is still there as well, but I'd like to see Mark possibly go into a coaching role at Cork and use his experience for the club, Adrian, but as I said, that was a big area for them to address, and they have done that. Ali Gilchrist coming in at the back will make him very, very solid, I think. Very good performer last year for Shelbourne. And then they've real quality, I think, in the wide areas, don't they? They've added James Doonat from that loan. He was very impressive when he came to the Markets Field. They've Dylan McGlade, who I know you'll say is very hit and miss, but I'm a fan. I really am. And they're 2 wide players that can be exciting. Barry Coffey, I think it's going to be a big, big season for him. And Alec Byrne is a player that I'm very familiar with. He's come through the ranks with Cork City. He played in their Kennedy Cup teams and things like that. You have Cian Coleman, Aaron Bulger. And at the top end then, Cian Murphy, as I said, has hit the ground running. So I would expect Cork City to start the season with a win, Adrian.
Yeah, I saw you smirking at that one, Noel. It was a strange one when I saw Corey Chambers signed as well. It's 4 goalkeepers for Cork City in the first team squad, but it did make me believe that Mark McNulty would finally be, although we've been saying that for about 2 or 3 years now at this stage. You know, I suppose the other side of it is, Jason mentioned Keane Murphy there has scored 2 goals pre-season. That's one thing, I suppose, that people will still have a doubt over on consistency levels. If Cork City, though, can get Keane Murphy or maybe a Rory Keating or a firing on all cylinders, you know, you'd imagine they'd be right up there. But for this game, I suppose, is the concentration for right now. Noel, do you think that Cork can come away from the Carlisle grounds with the win?
I do, and I was laughing at Mark McNulty because obviously he was there in my time as the reserve keeper. But I
didn't want to bring it up as if it was that long ago.
Absolutely, yeah. And he actually featured in a few of the pre-season games as well, where he came on in the second half, and I was wondering how did Jimmy Corcoran feel about that, because they started the game with David Harrington, and then Mark McNulty came on at half-time. But look, the fact that Corey Chambers has come in as well, it's certainly muddied the water for more than Mark McNulty, I think. But we'll see how that develops. I'd be confident that Cork will win. And I'd expand on Jason's point. I think he's right about Dylan McGlade, and he is a super player. And, you know, I think the fact that he was inconsistent was more to do with Cork. And I think he's the kind of player that if his team is dominating more in a game, I think you'll really see a lot more of him, or, you know, a lot more goals and assists. And I think that's going to happen this year. You know, in fairness to him, I think he needs to be playing in a stronger team, or a team that's more dominant, and you'd expect Cork to be more dominant in their matches this year. And, you know, he probably will add to his scoring tally and creating as well. And I think that Barry Coffey's certainly a key signing for them, if you like, because he came on loan and now they have him for the season. He's going to be a very big player in this division. You know, coming from where he came from, he'll be determined to do well, and I think he is a step up in class in terms of what you generally see in the first division. So I would expect Cork to be strong. I think they'll be under a bit of pressure at home. I still talk about that, the kind of pressure that is in Cork all the time. You know, to win every week, to not be in the first division, if you like. I don't think any other team will kind of suffer, if you like, more than Cork, and that might just hamstring them a little bit. But in terms of the weekend, I think they're certainly going to be good enough to pick up the 3 points there.
Yeah, the Barry Coffey signing was absolutely huge. Totally agree with you on that. I actually have Cork down for the win as well on that one. But just to stick with yourself, Noel, for the Longford game versus Cove, that'll be on Saturday night. I think Longford are the only side this year that'll be playing Saturdays. Cove have reverted to Friday evenings for the new season as well. Longford coming down from the Premier Division. You know, they've kept a few players. They've obviously lost a few, the likes of Abe Dervin as well. Aaron O'Driscoll both went to Shelburne as well. But they also have Sam Verdon up front as well. So we've discussed Cove as well in pre-season. Inexperienced looking squad for Cove. I suppose hard to call really in what way it's going to go. Longford at home, I was edging just because of the home advantage really for Longford for the victory. What do you think yourself?
Yeah, I'd be kind to agree. They brought 4 or 5 players in from Bray as well, who travelled with the manager. If you like, they always seem to have a good connection with Shamrock Rovers and get a couple of really good players, you know, who are just about to make the breakthrough for experience. And they're kind of more used to being relegated, if you like. I don't think it affects them as much as it can affect other clubs. It's not exactly a shock to the system for Longford to be relegated, and they're normally strong enough the following year, and I expect them to be one of the stronger clubs in the division, and certainly plenty strong enough to pick up a win on Saturday night. I agree with you with Cove. I think they are callow enough. They've lost a couple of experienced guys as well, and as I said in a previous podcast, I think they need a strong Cork City team in the Premier League for Cove to be strong. Certainly isn't the case at the moment. They seem to have a lot of young players about, guys who obviously will be delighted to get the chance, but I can't see them having a massive impact in the division this season, and certainly not on Saturday night either.
Jason, are we going for a trio of Longford wins?
We are, Adrian. You know, I think I'd agree with Noel there. I think Cove are going to struggle. this year even more so than last season. And Longford, look, are a club we don't know a whole pile about, let's be honest. You know, we said it last week, they're a bit of a yo-yo club, and I agree with Noel that it probably doesn't affect them as much as other clubs when they do get relegated. So it'll be interesting to see how they start the season. But I said it last week, I think their home form will be key. It really will. And I think they'll certainly start with a win against Cove at the weekend.
Well, there you have it. We'll certainly see how we all fare out next week in the first table that we will introduce, I suppose, after the predictions for league. And now we're on to what separates the men from the boys, I suppose, in terms of the league table predictions. It certainly did last year. I know Noel O'Connor came out on top there, and he hasn't let us forget it since. No, I'm only messing up. But, you know, what way we've tried to discuss it, I suppose, is we'll start, Noel, with the bottom teams in the division. I know people won't want to hear too much of what I have to say, but I'll be putting in my tuppence worth at some stage anyway. But we're going to start with the team in 9th and 8th position that you believe will be in 9th and 8th position for the season. Shout away, I suppose.
Yeah, well, you could toss a coin 9th and 8th or 8th and 9th, but I think they'll be occupied by Athlone and Cove. I probably could see Cove being at the bottom, because you never know. Like the thing that's hard to predict with Cove or Athlone is that what happens in the window. And often when things are going really bad, someone comes up with a few quid from somewhere where they get a couple of players in, and you know the fortunes raise. And we actually saw that last year with Paul Doolan coming in and a couple of players coming in with him. So you know, on the balance of that, I can't see anyone else being down there except for Cove in 9th and Athlone in 8th.
Yeah, I have the exact same two in that order: Cove 9th, Athlone 8th. Will that be the same for yourself, Jason, or is there going to be the cat among the pigeons?
No, I think it's obvious for everyone, Adrian, you know, that's going to be the bottom two. Martin, obviously, we said it's going in at Athlone. It doesn't look like there's a budget there. It's very last minute. And Cove, obviously, unless they really become hard to beat, which I don't think is the mantra down there, I think they're going to suffer big time. So Cove in 9th and Athlone in 8th for me as well, Adrian.
Yeah, whatever about the top positions and the two bottom positions in this league, the middle part of the table was one that I think many people that I've spoken to have struggled with in terms of calling who's going to finish where. For my own decision, I've actually went with Wexford to finish 7th. I know they finished bottom at last season. We have discussed how they've improved the squad an awful lot. I just don't know with the competitive nature of the squad, if the amount of players that they've brought in would be sufficient to jump up 4 or 5 places in the division into the playoff places. So I had them in 7th place. And I've actually went for Longford Town in 6th. I don't know about that one really. It was kind of between themselves and Bray, I thought, for the playoffs. And I just thought with Longford, maybe, as Noel said, I was thinking about the fact that maybe relegation doesn't affect Longford that much anymore. And Gary Cronin has managed to get Bray squads into the playoffs on a regular basis. But look, it was almost a toss of a coin. I went for Longford myself. Jason, your own 7th and 6th positions to miss out on the playoffs.
Yeah, same as yourself, Adrian. That's the way I've went. I've went Wexford 7 and Longford 6th. Look, they could swap positions in that final table, I suppose, but I don't think either of them will push into the playoffs. It'll be interesting to see, I suppose, how the Bray and Cabinteely merger works out, I suppose, on the pitch. But I just feel with Pat Devlin in charge, they'll be good enough to sneak into the playoffs. So yeah, agreeing with yourself, Adrian, definitely that the next two on the table, I suppose, is Wexford and Longford.
Yeah, Noel, unless you have 2 different picks, it feels like the Titanic. If one goes, we'll all go with the way the predictions are going so far. But who have been your own selections for 7th and 6th?
Yeah, well, I will go for a little shake up there, and I've gone for Bray to come 7th. I hear Jason, he obviously has a little doubt in his head, a little pebble in his shoe about the Bray Cabinteely merger, and I have as well. I'm not so sure it's going to be a roaring success. And I think some of the players that left Bray are going to be a big loss. And I do agree that Pat Devlin is a very experienced campaigner, but I think that there's an awful lot of the jigsaw that needs to be sorted out, and I'm not so sure that it's going to happen all in one season. So from that point of view, I'm going with Bray in 7th, and I'm going for Wexford in 6th. I certainly think they are going to improve, from bottom. I think to go up 3 or 4 places is a real big ask for anyone, and I think they're capable certainly of going into that 6th, and I think that they will cause a few upsets on the way this season.
Yeah, and we're making our way now into the playoff situation, something we didn't even have Treaty near last year, but obviously judging by what we've said so far, we do have Treaty in the playoff mix. This season, Jason, who's been your selection for 5th and 4th place respectively?
So based on obviously what I've said so far, Adrian, I think it'll be Bray in 5th and Treaty in 4th. I just think Tommy has put together a better squad this season than he had last season. But to flip that over, I suppose last season they were the surprise package. And I do think they caught a lot of teams and clubs by surprise last year. They weren't expecting a whole pile from Treaty. They didn't know the players that Treaty had out on the pitch. That's gone now. People are very familiar now with the Mark Walshes, the Sean Gearns and people like that, and they'll know how effective they can be. But look, they'll need to be, I suppose, as I said earlier, lucky with injuries. They can't afford the amount of suspensions that they got last year. They were kind of lucky on that front as well with the timing of those suspensions. Look, myself and Noel are in agreement about Bray. It's a toss of a coin, really, will they get in there? But I just feel with the experience that they have off the pitch, even on the pitch, they've added experience, they really have. And they still have some good players. So I think Bray will sneak in 5th and Treaty in 4th.
Yeah, I actually have Bray and Treaty in that order as well. Jason, I do feel that Bray left me down massively last year when I had him up as high as, I think it was 2nd, maybe 3rd, I'm not so sure. But, as you said, they've had a lot of experience, and if they can get the likes of Kieran Waters and Rob Manley firing like they had in the past with Cavan Teely, then, that might be enough to get them over the line. Treaty, similar to yourself in that respect. Noel, obviously you're not going to be the exact same in that way, but who have you went for 5th and 4th?
Yeah, well, I agree with you. With Treaty being in 4th, you picked up on my confidence for them earlier in the podcast. I think they're a very well balanced team now. I think the caveat is we're not sure how Jack Brady's going to go on goals. Is he going to be as good as Ty Ryan? Hopefully he won't have to be as good in many ways. And the right back position, I think, is one that it reared its ugly head, if you like, a few times last season. And Jason mentioned Mark Walsh to go there. I know Stephen Christopher played there in the match as well. Charlie Fleming is still around. I think how that goes will dictate a lot in how well they do. But, outside that, I think they have as strong of first 11 with everyone fit as most teams in the league, and they'll certainly be a handful for anybody in a different way, maybe to the way some of the other clubs will approach the game. So I've gone to Treaty in 4th. Longford, as I said already, I think they have a nice compact squad. They're going to have a bit of quality in it. They'll be under no pressure. There'll be no expectation there. They have a manager who, as you said already, has got his previous employers into the playoff. And Saturday night in Longford, their home record should be really, really good. And from that point of view, I had him getting in ahead of the other nearly ones, if you like, of Bray and Wexford in 5th.
And moving on now to the business end, and I suppose the famous full-time clubs in the first division. You have your Galway, Cork, Waterford access we haven't mentioned yet. I know from my own perspective, I have Galway in 3rd. I was surprised, I suppose, with how long it took certain players to get over the line. I was also surprised with the fact that Evan O'Connor and Ed McCarthy had went to Galway, I must say, in the pre-season campaign. I didn't see that coming as well. But because of how well they had played, particularly in the second half of last season, how solid they were as well, and the fact that I think maybe the likes of Francilia Lombato will add an extra dimension to him, and maybe Jordan Adiemo, it's hard to know yet. He's had a decent pre-season. I'm going to put them in third position. And the top two was really, I didn't know where to go. I went for Cork to finish second in the division because I wasn't so sure on whether they'd get goals on a consistent basis, to be honest with you, even though there's no better place when things are going well than Turner's Cross, Jason, to play your football. There's no doubt about that. I think I know where your allegiance lies in terms of for Cork, but what have you went in terms of third and second position?
Yeah, I know I'm not going to endear myself to Kevin Kiley and Darren Noonan or the Blue Army, but for me, it's Cork City to win the league. I just think they've got quality all over the pitch. As I said earlier, that they've rectified the goalkeeper situation. They've strengthened right up the spine of the team. As I mentioned, Danny Gilchrist, you know, he's going to be huge for them. And in the middle of the field, they have creativity and they have workers. And I think they have goals, Adrian. I do. I think Cian Murphy's a year older this year. They have Dara Crowley, they've Rory Keaton, as you mentioned. So look, it's Cork City first for me. Waterford a close second, and I think Galway will finish in third. I just think they didn't impress me overly last year. They didn't. I think goals will be a problem again. I take your point on Francili Lambato, and I'm a fan, don't get me wrong, and he has that pace. Will he partner Wilson Aweru? Will he be a 4-4-2? We know it'll be direct from John Caulfield, but I just think the resources, Ian Morris in Waterford, I'd give them the nod to finish ahead of Galway. And as I said, it's Cork first, it's Waterford second, and it's Galway in third position for me.
And Noel O'Connor, it's time for your top three in the Airtricity League First Division. I suppose we'll start and build up to the finale with your 3-2-1 for the league.
Yeah, certainly a bit more difficult than last year. I feel like there's no one really as clear-cut. I thought the Shelbourne were very clear-cut last season. When you have three full-time teams there, it's obviously it's going to be a little bit tighter. I've gone for Galway in third as well. While they have signed a couple of guys, and you've mentioned them already, you know, if they do score goals, I think they'll certainly do very, very well. But I think they're, you know, at the moment, it's just a bit of a gamble. We're not quite sure whether it's going to happen or not. And from that point of view, I've gone with them coming third. My team in second place is actually Cork City, and something that I touched on a while ago. I think they will have a great season, but, you know, in terms of expectation and pressure, there's certainly a lot more of it on them for some reason, and even matches that are tight at home, you know, you've got to be able to deal with that crowd. They probably will get big crowds, particularly with the you know, the ban on the attendance gone, and that, you know, that brings its own kind of pressure on players to do well. And if they're struggling against, you know, a team that the fans seem to think that they should be, you know, 2 or 3-0 up early on, it can have a bit of an effect on a team. And I think that they're going to have to deal with that. It'll be their first time dealing with that in a few years. And I just feel that Waterford have done their business very well. They brought in a manager, as Jason said, who knows exactly what it takes to win. I mean, I don't think the pressure is as high down there, and I think they'll, you know, that they'll want to bounce back. A lot of good characters down there. Jason mentioned Eddie Nolan, Brian Murphy in goals, guys who will feel kind of slighted that they were relegated and will want to put it right. And I think from that point of view, I think Waterford are going to end up as champions.
Well, there you have it, folks. Back hopefully in November, we'll be looking at this as with fond memories of our predictions. I find it hard to believe I will anyway. I also have Waterford, actually. I don't think I mentioned it, but I also have Waterford, like Noel, to win the league, to put it on record. But we shall see as the season goes on how wrong or right we are. Noel, to move on to more Treaty United news that we felt probably was appropriate to go towards the end of the show, but it was announced this morning that Shane Keegan, who would be a well-known manager, I suppose, in the last decade in the League of Ireland with Wexford, Galway, and he was involved in, I suppose, it wasn't Shane Keegan's fault, but he was involved in a shambolic situation with Dundalk maybe for the last year and a half. It must be said, with the departure of Giovanoli, he was brought in because he had the badges, but he was announced, without further ado, about me saying, as Treaty United's academy lead, or as some people might say, academy director, if you want to put it in a different way today, to work with Dermore and to work with the academy teams, both male and female, for the new season. It has been widely well received, judging by our Twitter and Facebook feeds this evening around the place, and seen as a bit of a coup. What's your own opinion on this, Noel?
Yeah, I suppose, look, we spoke here about certain players coming in to Treaty to kind of relaunch their careers, if you like. I think Enda Curran, it'd be fair to say that. Joe Gorman, who was obviously desperate to play at this level after, what happened our month or 6 weeks ago, I suppose, and it's the first time we've seen, a coach or a manager in the same situation. And I think Shane Keegan certainly fits the bill there. Obviously, I would know him for longer. He managed Wexford soon after I departed the scene. Obviously had a fantastic season winning the first division with, a very local side and a lot of lads that have come through the ranks over the years there, and led him into the Premier Division. Tough season it was always going to be, I suppose. He certainly did blot his copybook at the end of the season. It was very difficult to accept what was happening. The fact that it had been announced between the first leg of the playoff and the second leg of the playoff that he'd signed a contract and he was off to Galway, and it was the main topic of conversation before the team went out on the pitch for the second leg, which was hardly ideal. And I just thought it was all so unnecessary. I mean, he could have waited a week for the whole thing to happen, and no one is going to begrudge anyone if they get a chance to go full time to move on. But I think you've got to show due respect to the club that you were with, and in fairness to Mick Wallace and Sean O'Shea, they gave him the opportunity like they gave me the opportunity, and I thought they deserved a bit more. Obviously, I was very close to the scene there and was disappointed with what happened. So that was Wexford relegated, and he went to Galway. There was a very decent squad there. Didn't work out there either, and it was 2 relegations in 2 years. And you mentioned the mad situation that was happening in Dundalk. I suppose could have happened that he went there as the video analysis and ended up as the manager of the club. So look, it's a chance for redemption for him. He has all the qualifications and he has all the badges and that, and it'll be interesting to see how it goes. But I'm sure he's happy to be there as well, and it certainly will give him an opportunity to be back in the scene, if you like, and to be meeting all the League of Ireland family on a weekly basis.
Yeah, it certainly will be interesting seeing. I know the majority of seasons outside of the under-14 season, as we know, will be starting in March. So he'll have to get to work, very quickly. Just to finish on a bright note in terms of junior football, I know we haven't got a chance to discuss it tonight. We've had a packed show, unfortunately, in that respect. But we will finish by saying congratulations to Region United, Fairview Rangers and Pike Rovers, who all reached the last 16 of the FAI Junior Cup. Hard-fought wins for both Regional and Fairview. Pike had an easier route as such with a convincing 3-0 win over Athy. But they're all in the draw, which will be held at 1 o'clock, live streamed on YouTube tomorrow with the FAI channel, I believe. So all of those clubs are in the draw. There's a lot of games this week in the Munster Junior. You have Prospect travelling to Coachford, you have Crewe Park travelling to Drogheda, you have Ashley and Acadie travelling to Carrick, and then the all-Limerick clash between Pike and Regional. They'll be sick of the side of each other. This will be their 3rd meeting in 4 weeks as well. So that'll be a keenly contested affair, and we wish all those sides the best of luck. My thanks once again to both Jason and Noel. It was a packed schedule, a real slog, I suppose, as this first division season will probably be for us and the teams and managers involved this season. But it's been great to hear from you guys, and we will continue to bring as best as we can the knowledge that the lads have on a weekly basis. For also, good luck to Treaty United, of course, who face Wexford in the first game in Ferry Carrick Park. And hopefully next week we will be discussing Treaty United victory in detail and previewing their game with Athlone